The morning sun cast long shadows through the dust-laden streets of San Judas, painting the weathered storefronts in shades of rust and amber. Eli Mercer led his mare down Main Street, her hooves clicking against the hard-packed earth with a rhythm as familiar as his own heartbeat. The scent of leather, horse sweat, and alkali dust filled his nostrils, the perfume of a dying frontier town caught between yesterday's promises and tomorrow's uncertainties. Red dust coated everything in San Judas like a second skin. It settled on the warped wooden signs hanging from rusted chains, dulled the windows of Marisol's Cantina Tres Rosas, and turned the black suits of the railroad men into a mottled brown. Eli brushed a layer from his hat brim, squinting against the glare bouncing off the distant rails that cut through the landscape like a scar. "Easy, Sage," he murmured to his horse as she snorted at a tumbleweed rolling across their path. The mare's ears flicked back, acknowledging his voice. They'd been partners for 6 years now, longer than most marriages in these parts lasted. The crowd gathering outside the Wells Fargo office caught his attention. About 30 folks, maybe more, pressed close to hear whatever announcement Abner Pike was fixing to make. The railroad company man stood on a wooden crate, his city clothes marking him as surely as a brand, even from a distance. Eli could see Pike's self-satisfied smile, the look of a man who held all the cards and knew it. "By order of the Southwestern and Pacific Railroad Company," Pike's voice carried clear across the square. "All landowners within 2 miles of the proposed railway extension are hereby notified of the territory's right of eminent domain. Fair compensation will be offered." "Fair?" Old Martha Henderson's voice cracked like a bullwhip. $20 an acre ain't fair when that land's been in my family since the Mexican War." Pike's smile never wavered. "The railroad brings progress. Mrs. Henderson, jobs, prosperity, connection to the wider world. Surely that's worth minor sacrifices." Minor, Tom Bradley spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Pike's polished boots. "You're talking about our homes, Mr." Eli tied Sage to the hitching post outside the grain store, his movements deliberate and calm despite the anger building in his chest. His small horse ranch sat just inside that 2-mile radius. The patch of land wasn't much 40 acres of scrub grass and a reliable spring, but it was his. More importantly, it was Jake's grave that lay beneath the cottonwood behind the barn. His younger brother, killed 3 years back when Doyle's gang hit the supply train bringing dried goods and medical supplies to the territories. The crack of splitting wood interrupted his thoughts. A wagon wheel had given way on a dusty freight wagon near the corner of a 2nd Street. A woman in a practical brown traveling dress knelt beside the damaged wheel, her hands already working to assess the brake. "Ma'am." Deputy Amos Reed approached her, his badge catching the sunlight. "You need help." She looked up, and Eli found himself studying her face. Not beautiful in the painted way of saloon women, but there was something compelling about her steady gray eyes and the determined set of her jaw. A strand of dark hair had escaped from beneath her bonnet, and she pushed it back with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of axle grease on her cheek. "Thank you, Deputy, but I can manage. Just need to redistribute the weight before I attempt a repair." Her voice carried a hint of Eastern education tempered by frontier practicality. Young Tommy Martinez had wandered over, drawn by curiosity. Blood seeped through a tear in his shirt sleeve, likely from climbing through barbed wire again. The woman noticed immediately. "Come here, child," she said, her tone shifting to one of gentle authority. Without waiting for permission, she retrieved a canvas roll from her wagon and unfolded it to reveal an array of medical implements. "Let me see that arm." "It ain't nothing, ma'am," Tommy protested, but she was already cleaning the wound with practiced efficiency. "Isn't anything," she corrected automatically, then smiled to soften the lesson. "And even small wounds can fester in this climate." Her fingers worked quickly. Surely, within minutes, she'd cleaned, treated, and bandaged the cut with a precision that spoke of experience. From across the way, one of the railroad workers stumbled out of the saloon, clutching his hand. Blood dripped between his fingers. Damn knife slipped, he muttered to no one in particular. The woman stood, brushing dust from her skirts. Sir, I can help with that. The worker, a burly Irishman with arms like tree trunks, looked skeptical. You a doctor, lady? A nurse, trained at Pennsylvania Hospital. She was already guiding him to sit on a barrel, examining the deep gash across his palm. You're lucky. No tendon damage. But this needs sutures. Eli found himself moving closer, drawn by professional curiosity. He'd seen plenty of field medicine during cattle drives, but her movements had a different quality, precise, economical, confident. She worked as if the growing crowd of onlookers didn't exist. There, she said finally, tying off the last stitch. Keep it clean and dry. Come see me in 3 days to check for infection. Where might that be, ma'am? The worker asked, flexing his fingers experimentally. A shadow crossed her features. I haven't secured lodgings yet. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the crowd began to disperse from Pike's announcement. Whispers followed the stranger woman as she returned to her broken wagon. Eli caught fragments traveling alone. Unseemly. Probably running from something. Marisol Vega emerged from her cantina, wiping her hands on her apron. The older woman had run the establishment for 20 years, serving as unofficial mother hen to half the territory. She studied the newcomer with shrewd eyes before approaching. You have a name, señorita. Lena Hart. The woman straightened, meeting Marisol's gaze directly. Well, Lena Hart. That wheel won't fix itself, and the sun won't get any cooler. I've got a room above the cantina, clean sheets. No questions asked. If you've got $2 a week, I can pay. Lena's relief was subtle but visible. Thank you, Mrs. Marisol. Just Marisol. She turned to the cluster of men still lingering nearby. And you all got nothing better to do than gawk vamonos. As the crowd scattered, Eli found himself standing alone with the women. Marisol noticed him and raised an eyebrow. Something you need. Eli. He cleared his throat, suddenly aware he'd been staring. Your horse. Miss Hart, the livery's full up with railroad stock, but I've got extra stalls at my place. No charge for the first week while you get settled? Lena studied him, those gray eyes seeming to measure his intentions. That's generous. Mr. Mercer, Eli Mercer. I couldn't impose. No imposition. Horse needs proper shelter in this heat. He paused, then added, I run a small operation south of town. You'd be doing me a favor. Really, Sage here gets lonely. It was a transparent excuse, and they both knew it. But frontier courtesy demanded certain fictions be maintained. Lena nodded slowly. Then I accept, with thanks. The crack of the telegraph key echoed from the Western Union office, sharp and insistent. Sam Chen, the operator, appeared in the doorway, his usually calm face creased with concern. Deputy read message coming through, there's been another raid. The crowd reformed instantly. Drawn by the electric pull of bad news, Eli's blood cooled despite the heat. Another raid meant Doyle's gang was active again. Where? Amos demanded, pushing through to the telegraph office. Supply train, near Devil's Canyon. Medical supplies and army payroll. Sam's fingers flew over his transcription. 6 dead, including 2 guards from Fort Sumner. Eli's hands clenched. Medical supplies just like when Jake died. The gang's calling card was consistent, hit the trains carrying necessities. Leave communities to suffer without medicine or goods. Then disappear into the maze of canyons that scarred the territory. Same pattern, Amos muttered, studying the telegram. They knew exactly when and where to hit. Pike's voice cut through the murmur of voices. This is exactly why we need the railroad expansion. More tracks mean more security, more prosperity, more targets. Eli interrupted, his voice flat. The raid started when your company began surveying. Curious coincidence. Pike's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting something, Mr. Mercer. Just observing patterns? Eli touched his hat brim, a polite gesture that carried an edge of mockery. Like how Doyle's gang always seems to know which trains carry the richest loads. The tension stretched taut before Amos stepped between them. That's enough. We've all got troubles enough without adding to them. He looked at Pike. When's your next supply shipment due? That's company business, Deputy. It's territorial business when people are dying for it. As the two men faced off, Eli noticed Lena Hart standing near the telegraph office, her expression thoughtful. When Pike and Amos moved their argument inside, she lingered, studying the yellow telegraph form scattered on Sam's desk through the window. Later, as the sun tilted toward the horizon, Eli led Lena's horse, a sturdy bay mare, toward his ranch. Lena walked beside him, having changed into a split riding skirt more suitable for the rough path. You've been here long, Mr. Mercer, she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Born here, back when it was still Mexico. He gestured toward the distant mountains. My parents came west with the first wave after the war, built the ranch from nothing. And now the railroad wants to take it. He glanced at her, surprised by the bitter edge in her tone. You sound like someone who's tangled with them before. She was quiet for a long moment, watching a hawk circle overhead. Progress has a price, usually paid by those who can least afford it. They walked in companionable silence until the ranch came into view, a modest adobe house with a well-maintained barn and corral. Nothing fancy, but clean and solid. A single cottonwood tree provided shade near the barn, its leaves rustling with the evening breeze. It's peaceful, Lena observed. It is. Eli led her mare to the corral, checking the water trough. Sometimes too peaceful. She seemed to understand what he left unsaid, the absence of family voices, of shared meals and laughter, the weight of maintaining something meant for more than one person. As he showed her the feed routine, Nora Pike appeared around the corner of the barn. The girl couldn't have been more different from her uncle, where he was all sharp angles and calculating eyes. She had an open face and ink-stained fingers from her telegraph work. Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry to intrude, but... She stopped, noticing Lena. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Miss Hart, this is Nora Pike. She helps Sam at the telegraph office. Eli made the introduction carefully, watching Nora's reaction to the stranger. Pike, Lena's voice was neutral, but Eli caught the slight tension in her shoulders. My uncle's the railroad man, Nora admitted, looking uncomfortable. But I just run messages and help with translations. I'm good with codes and... She trailed off, then seemed to gather courage. Miss Hart, I heard what you did for Tommy Martinez and Sean O'Brien today. We don't have a proper doctor since Doc Holbrook died last winter. It's been hard, especially for the families with children. I'm not a doctor, Lena reminded her. But you're trained. That's more than anyone else here has. Nora pulled a folded paper from her pocket. I wasn't supposed to see this, but there's something you should know about the medical supplies on that raided train. She handed the paper to Lena, who unfolded it carefully. Eli couldn't see the contents, but he watched Lena's expression shift from curiosity to something harder. This is a shipping manifest, Lena said quietly. Look at the bottom, the rerouting orders. Lena's finger traced down the page. The medical supplies were supposed to go to Fort Sumner first. Someone changed the route to send them through Devil's Canyon. She looked up at Nora. Why show me this? The young woman bit her lip. Because whoever changed that order killed those guards just as surely as if they'd pulled the trigger themselves. And because... She glanced around nervously. Because I recognize the authorization code. It's one my uncle uses. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Eli felt pieces clicking together in his mind, the timed raids. Pike's push for land acquisition. The way Doyle's gang always seemed to be one step ahead. You're taking a risk, Lena said finally, folding the paper carefully. Someone has to. Nora straightened her shoulders. I won't be party to murder, even by silence. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, Eli realized the quiet life he'd built was about to shatter. The woman beside him carried secrets that could either save them all or bring the full weight of the railroad's wrath down on their heads. In the distance, a coyote howled a lonely sound that echoed across the desert. The wind picked up, swirling red dust around their feet, coating everything in its fine embrace. Change was coming to San Judas, whether they wanted it or not. I should go, Lena said quietly. Marisol will wonder what's become of me. I'll walk you back. No need. I can find my way. She paused, then added, Thank you, Mr. Mercer, for the kindness to a stranger. Eli, he corrected. And you're not a stranger anymore, Miss Hart. You're San Judas folk now, for better or worse. She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. Lena, and I have a feeling it's going to be both. As she walked away, Eli noticed how she moved alert, aware of her surroundings, like someone who'd learned to watch for danger. Whatever had brought her to San Judas, he suspected it wasn't coincidence. The telegraph key's distant chatter carried on the wind, spelling out messages in dots and dashes. Somewhere in those coded communications lay truth about the raids, about Pike's plans, about the danger closing in on them all. Eli touched the brim of his hat, red dust falling from the gesture like dried blood. The storm was coming, and this time he wouldn't stand aside and let it take what was his. Not again. The drought had teeth. It gnawed at San Judas with patient hunger, turning the earth to powder and men's tempers to tinder. 3 weeks had passed since Lena Hart's arrival, and in that time, not a drop of rain had blessed the territory. The communal well behind the church had dropped to half its usual level, forcing rationing that set neighbor against neighbor. Eli arrived at dawn to find a crowd already gathered, their faces hard with worry. Martha Henderson clutched her bucket like a weapon, squared off against the Dominguez family. You took more than your share yesterday, Martha accused, her voice cracking like dried leather. My children are thirsty, Rosa Dominguez shot back. Would you have them suffer? We're all suffering, Tom Bradley interjected, stepping between the women. Fighting won't make the water flow faster. Old Jonah appeared at Eli's elbow, his weathered face grim beneath his battered hat. Seen this before, the ranch hand muttered. Back in '64, town nearly tore itself apart before the rains came. Any sign? Eli asked, though he knew the answer. Jonah could read weather like scripture. Pressure's building wrong. When it breaks, it'll be sand, not water. The old man spat into the dust. Mark my words, we'll have a dust storm before we see rain. The prophecy hung between them as more townsfolk arrived for their morning rations. Eli noticed Lena among them, helping elderly Mrs. Chen manage her buckets. In the weeks since her arrival, she'd woven herself into the fabric of the town with quiet efficiency. Her makeshift clinic in Marisol's back room saw a steady stream of patients' children with scrapes, women with private ailments they wouldn't discuss with male doctors, workers injured by the relentless railroad construction. Next, Deputy Amos called out, trying to maintain order at the well. The morning sun climbed higher, baking the moisture from everything it touched. By the time Eli filled his containers, sweat had soaked through his shirt despite the early hour. He loaded the water onto his wagon, planning to head back to the ranch, when movement at the horse market caught his attention. Lena stood near the auction block, examining a torn saddle that belonged to Miguel Santos. The vaquero had fallen on hard times, forced to sell his gear to buy food. Lena ran her fingers along the split leather, assessing the damage. Can it be saved? Miguel asked, hope and desperation warring in his voice. The leather's still good beneath, Lena confirmed. I can reinforce the tear with a backing piece, double-stitch the seams. It won't be pretty, but it'll hold. I can't pay much. I need practice with heavy leather work. She met his eyes steadily. Consider it an exchange of learning. Eli recognized the fiction for what it was. Frontier pride demanded the giving and receiving of charity be disguised as mutual benefit. He'd done the same dance many times himself. As Miguel led his horse away, Eli approached. That was kindly done. Lena shrugged, already examining another piece of leather. A man needs his tools to work. Without work, there's no dignity. Speaking of work, Eli nodded toward her growing pile of mending. My barn roof could use patching before the storms hit. I'd pay fair wages. She looked up sharply. I'm no charity case. Mr. Mercer. Didn't say you were, but that leatherwork's pulled your stitches loose. He gestured to her palm, where a thin line of red showed through her bandage. Must have hurt yourself helping with that freight wagon. Seems you're better at doctoring others than yourself. A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. Observant. Survival trait out here. He loaded the repaired saddle into his wagon. The offer stands. Marisol knows where to find me. The cantina's afternoon shade provided blessed relief from the sun. Marisol's establishment served as more than a watering hole. It was the town's unofficial meeting place, neutral ground where ranchers and railroad men could drink side by side without bloodshed. Usually. Today, tension crackled through the air like lightning-seeking ground. Abner Pike held court near the bar, surrounded by his crew of surveyors and enforcers. Across the room, local ranchers clustered together, their conversations low and angry. It extended the deadline. Pike was saying, his voice carrying deliberately, the railroad's generosity has limits. Those who haven't accepted our offers by month's end will find the price adjusted. Adjusted down, you mean? Frank Morrison growled from the rancher's table. His spread neighbored Eli's. 40 years of back-breaking work carved into every acre. Pike's smile was sharp as a skinning knife. Market forces, Mr. Morrison. Supply and demand. As more accept our offers, the holdouts become less essential. You mean more vulnerable, Eli said quietly. Entering the conversation, every head turned as he approached Pike's table. Easier to squeeze when they're standing alone. Business is war by other means. Mercer. Pike sipped his whiskey. Imported stuff that cost more than most men saw in a month. Your father understood that. Pity he didn't pass the lesson along. The reference to his father, who died defending the ranch from claim jumpers, sent heat flashing through Eli's chest. His hand dropped instinctively to his gun belt before he caught himself. Careful, Pike, Amos warned from his position by the door. This badge means I keep the peace, but it don't mean I'm deaf to fighting words. The moment stretched taut before Marisol's voice cut through like a cleaver. Enough you want to kill each other. Do it outside. Blood's hell to clean from these floors. The confrontation dissolved into grumbles and hard looks. Pike's men filed out first, their spurs ringing against the floorboards with military precision. As they passed, one of them, a scar-faced gunman Eli didn't recognize, deliberately shouldered Frank Morrison. Watch yourself, old man. Frank's hand twitched toward his weapon, but Eli caught his wrist. Not here, not now. After Pike's crew departed, the ranchers huddled closer. We can't keep taking this, Morrison muttered. They're bleeding us dry with legal papers and threatening worse. What choice do we have? Bradley asked. Can't fight the law and the gun both. The law's supposed to protect us, Martha Henderson said bitterly. She'd aged years in the weeks since Pike's announcement. But it's been bought and paid for like everything else. Eli noticed Lena sitting quietly at a corner table, ostensibly focused on her mending but clearly listening. Her fingers moved automatically over the leather while her gray eyes tracked the conversation. The door burst open, admitting a dust-covered rider. Fire! He gasped. The Bennett Place barn's burning! The saloon emptied in seconds, men racing for horses and buckets. Eli found himself riding beside Amos and Frank. Sage's hooves pounding the baked earth. In the distance, black smoke rose like a funeral pyre against the bleached sky. By the time they arrived, the barn was beyond saving. The Bennett family stood in a cluster, watching their winter feed go up in flames. Tom Bennett's face was stone, but his wife wept openly while their children clung to her skirts. "Started in the hayloft," Bennett said numbly. "No lanterns up there, no reason for fire. Just started." Eli dismounted, studying the scene. The house stood untouched, as did the other outbuildings. Only the barn and its precious feed stores had been targeted. Convenient. Frank Morrison spat. "Lose your feed. Can't keep your stock. Can't keep stock. Can't work the land. Can't work the land." "You sell to the railroad," Eli finished. Deputy Amos crouched near the barn's remains, sifting through ash. "Could have been an accident. This drought, hay can combust on its own if it's packed wrong." "Could have been," Eli agreed, though neither man believed it. The firefighting done, people began drifting away. Eli noticed Lena had arrived with Marisol, both women carrying medical supplies. While no one was seriously hurt, there were plenty of minor burns and smoke-seared lungs to tend. "Let me see those hands." Lena ordered Tom Bennett, who'd burned himself trying to save what he could. As she worked, she spoke quietly. "I've seen fires like this before. During the war. Always strategic targets. Always deniable." Bennett's jaw tightened. "You saying what I think you're saying. I'm saying burns have patterns. Natural fires spread wild. Set fires burn with purpose." She wrapped his hands with gentle efficiency. "Be careful, Mr. Bennett. Next time they might not wait for the barn to be empty." Evening brought no relief from the heat. If anything, the air grew heavier, pressing down like a wool blanket. At the telegraph office, Nora Pike worked alone, transcribing the day's messages. Eli found her there when he stopped to send word to the territorial marshal about the fire. "Another complaint that'll go nowhere," Nora said bitterly, not looking up from her key. "They all do. Your uncle's not making friends." She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "My uncle doesn't want friends. He wants subjects." Her fingers paused over the keys. "Mr. Mercer, I need to show you something." She pulled out a leather journal, its pages filled with coded messages. "I've been tracking the patterns. Every raid, every accident, every fire they're coordinated. Look." She spread the pages, revealing a complex web of connections. "The Bennett fire. A message went out this morning. Coded, but I recognized the cipher. Same one used before the Dominguez well went dry, before the Morrison fence got cut." "You're saying—" "I'm saying someone's orchestrating this, squeezing from both ends Doyle's gang hitting the supplies, mysterious accidents hitting anyone who won't sell." She met his eyes. "And all the orders come through the same relay station, Amarillo. That's where my uncle gets his instructions from the railroad company." Eli studied the evidence, pieces of the puzzle sliding into place. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the only one strong enough to stand up to him who hasn't had an accident yet." She closed the journal. "And because Miss Hart asked me to." That stopped him cold. "Lena!" "She's been investigating too, quietly, carefully. She has her own reasons for wanting the railroad exposed." Nora glanced at the door, then leaned closer. "She's not just a nurse. Mr. Mercer. During the war, she worked with the Underground Railroad. She knows how to move unseen, gather information, get it to people who can use it." The revelation shouldn't have surprised him. He'd sensed hidden depths in Lena Hart from the beginning, but knowing she was actively working against Pike changed things. "Where is she now?" "With Marisol. I think they're planning—" Nora broke off as footsteps approached. She bent back over her key, tapping out a harmless message about commodity prices. One of Pike's surveyors entered, his eyes suspicious. "Working late. Miss Pike." "Just finishing the day's transmissions. Mr. Hardwick." Her transformation into the dutiful employee was seamless. "Did you need to send something?" "Your uncle wants you back at the house, says it's not proper. A young lady alone after dark." "Of course. Let me just close up." After Hardwick left, Nora quickly pressed a folded paper into Eli's hand. "Tomorrow night, Marisol's back room. Come alone." The walk back to his ranch gave Eli time to think. The stars emerged one by one, diamonds against velvet, but he barely noticed their beauty. His mind churned over the day's revelations, the coordination between the railroad and the outlaws. Lena's hidden purpose, the net closing around the remaining holdouts. He found old Jonah waiting on the porch, a rifle across his knees. "Saw riders earlier," the old man reported. "Kept their distance, but they were watching." "How many?" "3, maybe 4. Moved like they knew the land." Jonah shifted his tobacco plug. "You expecting trouble?" "Always." Eli settled beside him, grateful for the company. "Jonah, you remember the war?" "Hard to forget. Why?" "Just wondering how folks decided which side to join when the lines weren't clear." Jonah was quiet for a long moment. "Man doesn't choose sides, mostly. Sides choose him. Push comes to shove. You stand with what matters most." He gestured toward the small cemetery plot beneath the cottonwood. "Your brother knew that. Died protecting what couldn't protect itself." Jake's grave marker caught the moonlight, a simple wooden cross that Eli replaced each year when the weather wore it down. 3 years, and the anger still burned fresh as the day they'd brought his body home. "Storm's coming," Jonah said suddenly. "Feel it in my bones." Eli studied the clear sky. No clouds. "Don't need clouds for the kind of storm brewing here." The old man stood, joints creaking. "I'll take first watch. You get some sleep. Something tells me we're gonna need it." Inside the house, Eli found he couldn't settle. He cleaned his rifle, checked his ammunition, tasks that required no thought but occupied his hands. His mind kept returning to Lena Hart, her capable hands, her quiet courage, the steel beneath her soft voice. Now he understood what drew her here, what kept her despite the danger. She was hunting the same men who'd taken Jake, just by a different route. A sound outside brought him to his feet, weapon in hand, but it was only Sage, nickering nervously in the corral. He stepped onto the porch, scanning the darkness. Nothing moved, but the air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. In the distance, a coyote howled, the sound cutting off abruptly. Eli waited, counting heartbeats, but the night remained silent. Whatever had silenced the coyote was still out there. "Company," Jonah whispered from his position. "Southwest corner, moving slow." Eli eased into the shadows, every sense alert. Boots scraped against stone, someone unfamiliar with the terrain. Not locals, then railroad men or hired guns. A match flared near the barn, illuminating a scarred face for an instant before darkness reclaimed it. The same man who'd shouldered Morrison at the cantina. "That's close enough," Eli called out, rifle steady. The match dropped, extinguished. "Easy. Mercer, just checking the property lines for Mr. Pike. Public service, you might say." "My property lines are none of Pike's business. Everything's the railroad's business now." The voice carried smug certainty. Smart men recognize that. Smart men make deals. "Get off my land." A low chuckle. "Your land, for now. But drought's a terrible thing. Makes men desperate, makes them careless with fire." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Eli's finger tightened on the trigger, but firing would give them the excuse they wanted. After a tense moment, he heard Boots retreating, horses moving off into the night. "They'll be back," Jonah said unnecessarily. "I know." Eli lowered his rifle, fury cold in his gut. "But next time, we'll be ready." The wind picked up as the riders disappeared, carrying the scent of distant rain that would never fall. Dust devils danced across the yard, harbingers of the storm Jonah had predicted. Not water, but wind and sand and fury. Change was coming to San Judas. Whether as salvation or destruction remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the battle lines were drawn, and neutrality was no longer an option. In town, a light burned late in Marisol's back room where 3 women planned revolution by lamplight. On the ranch, 2 men kept watch against the darkness, and somewhere in the desert, predators circled, waiting for their moment to strike. The dust storm was coming, and with it, a reckoning that would reshape the territory forever. The sky turned the color of dried blood at midday, and every creature with sense sought shelter. Horses stamped and whinnied in their stalls, eyes rolling white with primitive fear. Dogs crawled under porches, whimpering at the electricity that crackled through the air. Even the buzzards abandoned their lazy circles, fleeing toward whatever refuge the desert might offer. Eli stood on his porch, watching the wall of dust advance across the plateau like an army of ghosts. He'd seen storms before, but this one carried malevolence in its belly, a grinding, churning mass that blotted out the mountains and turned the sun to a diseased orange eye. "She's a big one," old Jonah said, emerging from the barn with rope and canvas. "Seen the like back in '61, buried whole homesteads." They worked in practiced silence, securing everything that might become a projectile when the wind hit. Water barrels were dragged inside, tools locked down, shutters barred with crossbeams. Eli led Sage and the other horses into the most protected stalls, speaking soft reassurances they couldn't possibly believe. "Riders coming," Jonah called out, squinting through the thickening air. "From Townway." A supply wagon materialized from the haze, bouncing dangerously over the rutted trail. Eli recognized Tom Bennett at the reins, his wife clutching their children in the bed. Behind them, another wagon carried the Dominguez family, their faces masked against the dust. "Barn burned out, nowhere else to shelter," Bennett shouted over the rising wind. "Hoped you might—" "Get inside." Eli waved them toward the house. "Jonah, help with the wagons." As they unloaded essentials, more refugees appeared. Frank Morrison with his pregnant daughter-in-law, the widow Chen with her grandchildren, others whose homes wouldn't withstand what was coming. Eli's modest ranch house, built solid by his father's hands, became a haven. "This is good of you, Eli," Morrison said, helping to carry in water jugs. "Not everyone would open their doors." "Not everyone remembers what neighbors are for." Eli scanned the road, an unnamed worry gnawing at him. "Anyone seen Miss Hart or Marisol?" "Cantinas built like a fortress," someone offered. "They'll be fine." But Eli couldn't shake the feeling that fine was about to become a scarce commodity in San Judas. The storm hit like a fist. Windows rattled in their frames despite the shutters. Dust forced its way through every crack and crevice, coating everything in a fine red film that tasted of copper and decay. The children huddled together, some crying, others wide-eyed with terrified fascination. Their mothers sang softly, old Spanish lullabies that fought against the wind's howl. Eli and the men took turns checking the doors and windows, reinforcing weak spots with furniture and determination. During one such circuit, he found Jonah staring out through a crack in the shutters, his weathered face grim. "What is it?" "Thought I saw. Nah, couldn't be. No one fool enough to be out in this." But Eli had learned to trust Jonah's instincts. He peered through the gap, seeing nothing but swirling chaos. Then movement, shapes that didn't match the storm's patterns. Riders, moving with purpose through the maelstrom. "How many?" "6, maybe 8, moving toward the supply depot." The depot where the railroad stored materials for construction, where dynamite waited in wooden crates, along with payroll for the workers. Eli cursed under his breath. Doyle's gang, using the storm as cover. "Could be they're seeking shelter," Jonah suggested without conviction. "Could be." Eli checked his rifle. Decision made. "I'm going to check on Lena and Marisol. Storm's too good a cover for mischief." "You're touched in the head." Jonah said flatly, "Can't see 10 feet in that mess." "I know the way blind," which was true. He'd walked the path to town so many times his feet could find it without his eyes. "Keep everyone calm. If I'm not back by nightfall." He didn't finish. They both knew the implications. Morrison caught his arm as he prepared to leave. "Whatever you're thinking, it's not worth dying for." "Some things are." Eli pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth. "Bar the door behind me." The storm swallowed him whole. Wind hammered from every direction, driving sand that stung like hornets through his clothes. Eli kept one hand on Sage's reins, trusting the mare's instincts more than his own. They moved by memory and feel, pausing in the lee of buildings when the gusts threatened to knock them flat. The town materialized in glimpses Murphy's store with its windows blown out, the church bell tolling wildly in the wind. Shapes that might have been people or might have been debris dancing through the streets. No lights showed anywhere. San Judas had become a ghost town, populated only by wind and fury. "At the cantina," Eli pounded on the reinforced door. "Marisol, open up." The bar lifted after a moment, and hands pulled him inside. He found himself in a crowd, mostly women and children, who'd sought shelter in the town's strongest building. Marisol stood like a general among them, directing the placement of water buckets and organizing comfort for the frightened. "Eli, what madness brings you out?" She helped him shed his dust-caked coat. "Is everyone safe at the ranch?" "As safe as anywhere. Where's Lena?" Marisol's expression darkened. "That stubborn girl. When the storm hit, there were workers trapped at the railroad cut. She went to help." She gestured helplessly. "I tried to stop her." "How long ago?" "An hour, maybe more. Nora went after her." Eli's blood chilled. The railroad cut was a half-mile north, where crews had been blasting through rock. In this storm, with unstable walls and limited shelter. "I need rope," he said, "bandages, whatever medical supplies you can spare." "You're not going after them." It wasn't a question. "Someone has to." Marisol studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Miguel, get the man what he needs, and add your prayers to it, he'll need those too." Minutes later, Eli pushed back into the storm, laden with supplies. The wind had shifted, driving the dust horizontally. He kept low, using buildings and walls as guides, pausing frequently to get his bearings. A gunshot cracked through the howl, followed by 2 more in rapid succession. Not the sharp report of a rifle, but the flatter sound of pistols. Close quarters fighting. Eli spurred Sage toward the sound, caution abandoned. The railroad cut appeared like a wound in the earth, its depths obscured by swirling dust. Equipment lay scattered: picks, shovels, overturned ore cart, and bodies. 3 workers lay motionless. Whether dead or unconscious, Eli couldn't tell. Beyond them, pressed against the cut's wall, Lena crouched over a wounded man while Nora stood guard with a pistol that looked too large for her hands. "Stay back," Nora shouted, not recognizing him through the storm. "It's Eli. Where are they?" "Scattered when we started shooting," Lena called out, not looking up from her patient. The man had taken a bullet in the thigh, a survivable wound if the bleeding could be stopped. "But they'll regroup." As if summoned by her words, shapes emerged from the dust. 4 men, bandanas obscuring their faces, moving with predatory purpose. Eli recognized the scarred man from the cantina by his gait alone. "Well, well," the man called out, voice carrying despite the wind. "The hero rancher comes to play. Mr. Doyle will be pleased." "Let the women go," Eli said, rifle steady despite the wind. "Your quarrels with me." "Our quarrels with anyone protecting railroad property." The scarred man gestured to his companions, who began spreading out. "Though we'll gladly include you in the discussion." "The workers aren't railroad property," Lena said sharply, still working on the wounded man. "They're people. People who chose the wrong side." The scarred man raised his pistol. Just like you. Several things happened at once. Nora fired, her shot going wide but forcing the outlaws to scatter. Eli's rifle barked, catching one man in the shoulder and spinning him down. The wounded worker Lena was treating grabbed a rock and hurled it with desperate strength, striking another outlaw in the head. Then the real fighting began. In the chaos of dust and gunfire, friend and foe became indistinguishable. Eli lost sight of Sage, lost track of up and down. He fought by instinct, using his rifle butt when ammunition ran low, grappling in the dirt with men who smelled of whiskey and desperation. A scream cut through the melee Nora's voice, high and terrified. Eli spun to find the scarred man had her by the hair, dragging her toward the cut's unstable wall. "Insurance," the man snarled. "Pike's brat niece ought to be worth safe passage." "Let her go." Lena appeared like an avenging angel, a surgical knife glinting in her hand. "Now!" The scarred man laughed. "Or what you'll give me a shave." Lena moved faster than thought, the blade slicing across the back of his hand. He howled, releasing Nora, who scrambled away. But his backhand caught Lena across the face, sending her sprawling. Eli roared, crossing the distance in 3 strides. His fist connected with the scarred man's jaw, followed by a knee to the ribs that doubled him over. They went down together, rolling in the dust, each seeking advantage. The outlaw was skilled, fighting dirty with elbows and headbutts. But Eli had learned to fight from Jonah, who'd survived Comanche raids and Mexican wars. He got his arm around the man's throat, squeezing steadily. "Yield," he growled. The man's response was to pull a hidden knife, stabbing blindly backward. Eli twisted, feeling the blade score along his ribs instead of finding his heart. His grip tightened, cutting off the outlaw's air until the man went limp. "Eli!" Lena's warning came just in time. He rolled aside as another outlaw's boot stomped where his head had been. But before the man could attack again, a rifle shot dropped him, through the dust. Eli glimpsed Deputy Amos Reed leading a group of townsmen, guns at the ready. "Cavalry's here," Amos shouted. "Though you folks seem to have things in hand." The remaining outlaws fled into the storm, leaving their unconscious leader and wounded behind. Eli struggled to his feet, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. How bad? Lena was there instantly, professional concern overriding everything else. "Shallow," he said through gritted teeth. "How's Nora?" "Shaken but whole." Lena's fingers probed the wound, making him hiss. "This needs stitches. You're lucky an inch deeper and—" "Story of my life. An inch from disaster." He tried for levity, but her expression remained serious. "Stop talking." She'd already begun cleaning the wound, her movements sure despite the wind still howling around them. "Nora, bring my bag. Mr. Reed, we need to get everyone to shelter. These walls could come down any moment." As if to emphasize her point, a section of the cut crumbled, sending rocks cascading down. The group moved quickly, supporting wounded between them, heading for the relative safety of the depot building. Inside, Lena transformed the rough space into a field hospital. She moved from patient to patient with calm efficiency, instructing others in basic care, rationing the limited supplies. Eli watched her work while Nora stitched his side Lena had taught the girl well. "She's something," Amos said quietly, settling beside Eli. "Don't see many with her kind of steel." "No," Eli agreed. "You don't." He paused, then asked, "What brought you out in this?" "Marisol. Woman near beat me senseless with a soup ladle. Said you'd gone after the ladies. Figured if you were fool enough to try. Least I could do was keep you company." The deputy's expression grew serious. "Good thing, too. That was Harlan Cobb you took down Doyle's right hand. There'll be consequences." "Let them come." Eli tested his side, wincing. "I'm tired of waiting for the next move." "Speaking of moves." Amos lowered his voice. "Found something interesting in Cobb's pockets." He produced a folded paper. Train schedule. Marked up real specific like. Eli studied the document. Tomorrow night, a special freight would pass through carrying mining equipment. But someone had penciled in additional cargo Army rifles bound for Fort Sumner. "They're getting bold," Eli said. "Or desperate. Word is the railroad's pushing hard for those last holdout properties. Pike's been promising results to his bosses back east." Amos took the paper back. "This fails, he might lose his position." Couldn't happen to a more deserving fellow. The storm began to ease as evening approached, the wind's howl diminishing to a moan. Through the depot's windows, they could see dust still swirling, but no longer with killing force. "We should move the wounded while we can," Lena announced. "Before dark brings new problems." They formed a ragged procession back to town, carrying those who couldn't walk, weapons ready for trouble that didn't materialize. The scarred man Cobb remained unconscious, hands bound for transport to the jail. His capture would send ripples through the territory's criminal network. At the cantina, Marisol waited with hot food and warm blankets. The refugees from Eli's ranch had also made their way in as the storm calmed, turning the saloon into a crowded but cheerful haven. "You're all fools," Marisol announced, ladling soup. "But brave fools, so I suppose that counts for something." As Lena redressed Eli's wound with proper bandages, he caught her hand. "That was dangerous. What you did." "So was coming after us." She met his eyes steadily. "Why did you—" He wanted to say something clever, something that wouldn't reveal how the thought of her in danger had driven him into the storm without hesitation. Instead, he simply said, "Neighbors help neighbors." She smiled then, the expression transforming her dust-streaked face. "Is that what we are, neighbors?" Before he could answer, Nora appeared with an urgent expression. "Miss Hart, Mr. Mercer, you need to hear this. Cobb's awake, and he's talking. Says Doyle's planning something bigger than train robberies." They exchanged glances. The storm had passed, but Eli sensed they were merely in the eye. The real tempest was yet to come. Outside, the setting sun painted the dust-hazed sky in shades of amber and rose. San Judas emerged from the storm, battered but unbroken. Its people gathered in the cantina's warmth. They'd survived nature's fury and human predation both. But tomorrow would bring new challenges. The train schedule in Cobb's pocket represented more than just another robbery. It was a declaration of war. And this time, Eli knew, there would be no staying neutral. The storm had chosen sides for them all. He looked at Lena, busy tending to others despite her own exhaustion, and felt something shift in his chest. Not just admiration or attraction, but a recognition of kindred spirit. Someone else who'd grown tired of running, of letting others dictate the terms of existence. The battle for San Judas had begun in earnest, and they would face it together inch by dangerous inch. The telegraph key chattered like teeth in the cold pre-dawn hours, spelling out secrets in dots and dashes. Nora Pike bent over her station, transcribing with practiced speed, while Lena watched the door and Eli studied the growing pile of decoded messages. "This one's from Amarillo," Nora whispered, though they were alone in the office. "Same cipher pattern as before. Shipment confirmed for Thursday. D will handle security. Ensure cooperation from local authority." "D for Doyle," Lena said quietly. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Eli picked up another decoded message. "This one's interesting. Pike's requesting additional men from the home office. Says local resistance is more organized than anticipated." "Good." Nora's young face hardened. "Let him sweat." 3 weeks had passed since the dust storm, and the alliance between Pike and Doyle's gang had grown bolder. 2 more ranches had suffered mysterious fires. The Hendersons woke to find their cattle scattered, fences cut with surgical precision. The intimidation campaign was intensifying, but so was the resistance. "We should go," Lena said, checking the window. "Dawn's coming." They slipped out through the back door, separating naturally Eli toward the livery stable, Lena to the cantina, Nora to her uncle's house where she maintained her facade of dutiful niece. They'd learned to move like shadows, never gathering in groups, never establishing patterns that could be tracked. At the stable, Eli found Frank Morrison waiting with coffee and grim news. "Tom Bennett sold out," Morrison said without preamble. "Pike's men came by yesterday with a new offer, triple the original price." Eli's jaw tightened. Tom swore he'd never. His wife's pregnant, after the fire, living in that half-burned house. Morrison shrugged helplessly. Can't fault a man for protecting his family. But Eli could see the fear in Morrison's eyes. Another ally gone. The circle of resistance shrinking. Who's left? You, me, the widow Chen. Handful of others. Maybe 15 families total. Morrison's laugh was bitter. David had better odds against Goliath. David had faith, Eli reminded him. And a good aim. They were interrupted by commotion in the street. Abner Pike strode past with his usual retinue of gunmen, heading toward the cantina. His presence this early boded ill. "Come on," Eli said. "Let's see what the railroad man wants now." The cantina was crowded despite the early hour. Word traveled fast in San Judas. Pike stood at the bar like a preacher at his pulpit, voice carrying clearly. Final offer. He was saying, "The Southwestern and Pacific Railway Company has been more than generous, but progress waits for no one. Those who haven't sold by week's end will find the terms adjusted." "You mean stolen," Marisol said from behind the bar, her voice cutting like a blade. "Call it what it is." Pike's smile was thin. "Careful, Senora. The railroad has a long memory for its enemies." "So do I," Marisol replied evenly. "I remember when this was Mexico. I remember when it was Spain before that. You're not the first man to come here thinking he owns tomorrow." The tension in the room crystallized, hard and sharp as broken glass. Pike's hand drifted toward his coat he'd taken to wearing a gun lately, but Deputy Amos Reed stepped between them. "That's enough," Amos said quietly. "Mr. Pike, you've made your announcement. Best move along now." Pike's eyes swept the room, lingering on Eli. "Progress is inevitable. Gentlemen, the wise man rides the train. The fool stands on the tracks." After he left, the cantina erupted in angry voices. Eli noticed Lena near the kitchen door, her expression thoughtful. She caught his eye and nodded slightly toward the back room. "I need to check your stitches," she announced, just loud enough for others to hear. Infection's always a risk in this climate. In the privacy of the back room, she dropped the pretense. "I received a letter from Fort Sumner." She produced an envelope from her apron. "Remember I told you I worked as a nurse during the war? Colonel Matthews was my commanding officer. He's concerned about the missing shipments." Eli read quickly. The Army was investigating the systematic theft of their supplies, particularly medical shipments. They suspected railroad involvement but needed proof. "This could be what we need," Eli said. "Federal investigation would take months," Lena interrupted. "And Pike would destroy any evidence long before they arrived. We need something more immediate." She paused, seeming to wrestle with a decision. "Eli, I need to tell you something about why I'm really here." He waited, watching emotions flicker across her face like shadows on water. "My brother was on that train 3 years ago. The one where—" She didn't need to finish. "The train where Jake died. He was bringing medical supplies to the reservation, trying to stop a typhoid outbreak among the Apache. 20 children died because those supplies never arrived." The pieces clicked together in Eli's mind. "You've been hunting them. Pike, Doyle, all of them." "For 3 years." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "Following the trail of stolen medicines, destroyed communities, lives traded for profit. It led here to San Judas." Eli took her hands, stilling their tremor. "You're not alone in this anymore." She looked up at him, and something passed between them, understanding. Recognition, a promise unspoken but understood. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass, before a noise from the cantina shattered it. They emerged to find chaos. One of Morrison's ranch hands had ridden in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. "They hit the Morrison place," the man gasped. "Dozen riders, maybe more. Mr. Morrison's holed up in the house with his family, but—" Eli was already moving, others following. They rode hard under the climbing sun, a ragged band of ranchers and townsmen united by desperation. The Morrison ranch appeared peaceful from a distance, but Eli knew that kind of quiet. It was the silence that followed violence. They found Morrison on his porch, rifle across his knees, his daughter-in-law bandaging a graze on his temple. The house was pocked with bullet holes, windows shattered. "Ran them off," Morrison said wearily. "But they'll be back. Made that real clear." "Anyone hurt bad?" Lena was already moving, medical bag in hand. "Nothing that won't mend." Morrison's eyes were haunted. "But Eli, they knew exactly when to hit, knew my hands would be out with the herd. Almost like someone told them." Eli finished. The implications hung heavy. A spy in their midst, feeding information to Pike. That evening, the resistance gathered in secret at Eli's ranch. The barn served as meeting hall, with Jonah and young Tommy Martinez posted as lookouts. About 20 people in all, a pitiful army against the combined might of the railroad and Doyle's gang. "We can't keep reacting," Morrison argued. "Every time they hit, we lose ground. Then we stop reacting," Eli said. "That train Thursday night, the one Cobb had marked. What if we get there first?" Silence greeted this suggestion. "Finally." The widow Chen spoke up. "You're talking about robbing a train. That makes us outlaws." "We're already outlaws in Pike's eyes." Eli countered. "The only question is whether we die as sheep or wolves." "The Army rifles," Lena said quietly. "If Doyle's gang gets those weapons, they'll be unstoppable. But if we intercept them, turn them over to Fort Sumner." "We prove the connection between Pike and Doyle." Nora finished. She'd slipped in through the back, still in her telegraph operator's attire. "And I can make sure our version of events reaches the territorial governor first." They talked late into the night, plans taking shape. It was ambitious, dangerous, likely to end with ropes around their necks if it failed. But the alternative, slow strangulation by legal means, seemed worse. As the meeting broke up, Eli walked Lena to where her horse waited. The stars blazed overhead, unmarred by cloud or dust. "You don't have to be part of this," he said. "You could leave. Tonight. No one would blame you." She turned to face him fully. "My brother's name was Michael. He was 23, idealistic, thought he could save the world one patient at a time." Her voice was soft but steady. "I couldn't save him, but maybe I can save the next Michael, the next Jake." "By robbing trains." "By standing up, by saying no more." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see starlight reflected in her eyes. "That's what you taught me, Eli Mercer, that there are things worth fighting for." He wanted to kiss her then, to pull her close and promise that everything would work out. But he'd learned the danger of promises in a land that broke them like drought breaks rivers. Instead, he squeezed her hand, trying to put everything he couldn't say into that simple touch. "Thursday night, then," he said. "Thursday night." As she rode away, Eli noticed a movement near the house. Jonah stood in the shadows, his weathered face unreadable. "You trust her?" the old man asked. "With my life." Jonah nodded slowly. "Good, because come Thursday, that's exactly what you'll be doing." He paused, then added, "Your PA would be proud, standing up to power, protecting what's right. It's what Mercers do." "What Mercers do." Eli agreed, though the words tasted of destiny and doom in equal measure. Over the next days, Preparations continued in secret. Weapons were cleaned and loaded. Horses were checked and double-checked. Plans were refined. Contingencies discussed. All while maintaining the illusion of normal life shops opened. Cattle were tended. The telegraph continued its endless chatter. Pike seemed oblivious to the growing conspiracy, too confident in his power to notice the undercurrents. He held court at the Grand Hotel, entertaining railroad executives from back east, promising them an empire built on stolen land and broken lives. But Doyle was more observant. His men were seen more frequently in town, asking questions, watching known troublemakers. The noose was tightening from both ends. Wednesday evening, Eli made his rounds one last time, at the cantina. Marisol blessed him in rapid Spanish, pressing a worn rosary into his hands. At the telegraph office, Nora showed him the false message she'd send, reporting the train delayed by mechanical trouble. In the stable, Morrison gripped his hand wordlessly, understanding passing between men who'd chosen their hill to die on. His last stop was the small cemetery behind his ranch. Jake's grave was well tended, the wooden marker recently whitewashed. Eli knelt in the dust, speaking to his brother as he hadn't in months. "I might be joining you soon," he said quietly, "but not without a fight, not without making them pay for what they took." He touched the marker gently. "Watch over us, little brother. We'll need all the help we can get." When he rose, Lena was there, having approached silent as a ghost. She carried a rifle he'd never seen before, well-maintained and deadly-looking. "My brothers," she explained, "seemed fitting." They stood together in the gathering dusk, two people bound by loss and purpose, preparing for a battle that would reshape their world. Tomorrow would bring violence and chaos, triumph or disaster. But tonight, in this moment of stillness before the storm, they had each other. "Whatever happens," Lena said softly, "I'm glad I came to San Judas. Glad I met you." Eli took her hand. Calluses meeting calluses. Strength recognizing strength. "Whatever happens," he agreed, "we face it together." The first stars appeared overhead, silent witnesses to promises made and kept. In the distance, a train whistle sounded lonely, mournful, like a preview of Thursday's reckoning. The die was cast. All that remained was to see how it would fall. The moon hung pale and thin as paper against the desert sky, casting long shadows across the ranch yard. Inside the kitchen, lamplight pooled golden on the worn wooden table where Lena worked with steady precision, her medical supplies laid out like a general's battle plans. "Hold still," she murmured, though Eli hadn't moved. He sat shirtless on a kitchen chair, trying not to think about her hands on his skin as she examined the healing wound from the dust storm fight. They'd returned from a brief skirmish with Doyle's scouts, nothing serious, just probing attacks to test defenses. But Eli had taken a tumble from Sage when the mare spooked at gunfire, reopening the barely healed gash along his ribs. "You're lucky," Lena said, cleaning the wound with gentle efficiency. "Another inch to the left and you'd have cracked a rib." "You keep saying that," Eli managed, his voice rougher than intended. "About inches and luck." "Because you keep testing both." She reached for fresh bandages, her movements economical, professional, but he caught the slight tremor in her fingers, the way she carefully avoided meeting his eyes. The kitchen was quiet, save for the whisper of cloth and their measured breathing. Outside, Jonah kept watch, giving them privacy under the pretense of security. The old man understood more than he let on. "This needs to be wrapped properly," Lena said, unfolding a long strip of linen. "You'll need to... that is, I need to..." "I trust you," Eli said simply. She looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted in the air between them. The professional distance she maintained wavered, revealing the woman beneath vulnerable, determined, achingly real. Her hands were gentle as she began wrapping the bandage around his torso, but Eli felt each touch like a brand. She worked in silence, focused on the task, but he could see the pulse fluttering at her throat, quick as a trapped bird. "Lena," he said softly. She stilled, hands resting lightly against the bandage. "Don't!" "Don't what?" "Don't make this harder than it already is." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Tomorrow we rob a train. We might die. We might all die. And I can't—" She broke off, struggling for composure. "You can't what?" He caught her hand, feeling the calluses from rains and medical work, the strength in those capable fingers. "I can't lose anyone else I care about." The words tumbled out in a rush. "My brother, my parents, everyone I've tried to help along the way. Death follows me like a shadow, and I won't let it take you too." Eli stood slowly, mindful of the fresh bandaging, and cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. Death's been following me since Jake died. Maybe longer, but you know what else has been following me." He waited until she met his eyes. "Life. Purpose. You brought both back to this place." "Eli, I never believed in love," he said quietly, the words coming from some deep, protected place. "Not after losing everyone that mattered. Figured it was safer to keep people at arm's length. Safer to be alone." She was crying now, silent tears that caught the lamplight. "And now—" He thought of all the moments that had brought them here, her competent hands healing strangers, her steady presence in crisis, the fire in her eyes when she spoke of justice, the way she'd stood beside him against storms, both natural and human-made. "The cowboy never believed in love," he said softly, echoing words she'd understand, until she undid his belt and said, "Now you do." She made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "That's not how it goes." "It is now." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, gentle as a promise. "Now I do. Lena, believe in love, in tomorrow, in the chance that we might survive this madness and build something worth having." "You're asking me to hope," she whispered. "Do you know how dangerous that is? I'm asking you to trust, to let someone else carry the weight for a while, to let me protect you the way you protect everyone else." Her hands came up to cover his, holding them against her face. "I don't know how to be protected. I only know how to guard." "Then we'll guard each other." The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious as blown glass. Then Lena rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and desperate and tasting of tears and possibility. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, she rested her forehead against his chest, careful of the bandages. "This is madness." "The best kind," he agreed, holding her close. "The kind worth fighting for." They stood that way for long minutes, finding comfort in simple proximity. Finally, Lena pulled back, wiping her eyes with characteristic practicality. "Your bandage needs securing," she said, voice almost steady. "And you need rest. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow we change everything," Eli finished. "But tonight, we're just us. Just this." She nodded, returning to her work with the hands that shook only slightly. As she adjusted the wrapping, she spoke quietly of other things: her training in Philadelphia, the patients she'd saved and lost, the long journey west following threads of corruption and cruelty. "I kept thinking I'd find the men responsible and somehow that would bring Michael back," she admitted. "Foolish, I know. But grief makes fools of us all." "Not foolish." Eli said, "Human. The difference between us and men like Pike is we remember our dead. We carry them. They just step over the bodies and keep walking." When the bandaging was complete, Lena packed her supplies with the same careful attention she brought to everything. But before she could leave, Eli caught her hand. "Stay," he said simply. Not like that. Just stay. Talk with me. Be with me, before tomorrow makes us into soldiers." She hesitated, propriety warring with desire. Then she nodded, settling into the chair across from him. They talked through the night, sharing stories and silences in equal measure. She told him about growing up in Pennsylvania Dutch country, about her father the clockmaker who taught her that small, precise movements could change the world. He spoke of learning to ride before he could properly walk, of Jake's endless questions about everything under the sun, of parents who built a life from dust and determination. "My mother would have liked you," Eli said as dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of pearl and rose. "She valued capability above all else. Said pretty was nice, but competent would save your life." Wise woman. Lena stretched, joints protesting the night spent in a hard chair. "We should prepare. The others will arrive soon." But neither moved, unwilling to break the spell of these quiet hours. Finally, Lena stood, smoothing her skirts with hands that trembled slightly. "Eli," she began, then stopped. "If something happens today—" "Nothing will happen," he said firmly. "We'll stop that train, expose Pike's corruption, save the town. Then we'll have time for all the words we can't say now." She smiled sadly. "You can't promise that." "Watch me." He stood, ignoring the pull of healing wounds, and drew her close once more. "I've spent 3 years living like a dead man, going through the motions. You changed that. You made me want tomorrow again. I'm not giving that up. Not for Pike, not for Doyle, not for all the railroads in creation." "Stubborn man," she murmured against his chest. "Stubborn woman," he countered. "Good match." A knock at the door interrupted Jonah's coded signal. The world was intruding, duty calling them back to harsh reality. "Whatever happens," Lena said, pulling away reluctantly, "I want you to know that these weeks in San Judas, meeting you, it's been worth everything. Worth the journey, the danger, all of it." "That sounds dangerously like goodbye." "Not goodbye." She touched his face gently. "Just insurance against an uncertain world." Before he could respond, she was gone, slipping out to help prepare for the gathering resistance. Eli watched her go, memorizing the way morning light caught in her hair, the determined set of her shoulders, the grace in her movements. Jonah entered, took one look at Eli's face, and grunted knowingly. "About time." "Don't start," Eli warned, reaching for his shirt. "Wasn't going to." The old man's expression grew serious. "But you be careful today. Man with something to live for fights different than a man with nothing to lose. Can make him stronger or weaker, depending. Which do you think I'll be?" Jonah considered. "Stronger, I reckon. Love's got a way of steadying a man's hand when it counts." He paused at the door. "Your ma and P.A., they had that kind of love. Kind that builds things, lasts through drought and plenty alike. Seems you might have found the same." After Jonah left, Eli finished dressing, checking weapons and supplies with automatic precision, but his mind kept returning to those moments in the kitchen, Lena's tears, her trust, the way she'd felt in his arms like coming home after a long journey. He touched the fresh bandages, feeling the neat wrapping that spoke of care beyond mere medical duty. Tonight they'd rob a train, risk everything on a desperate gamble. They might die, might hang, might fail so spectacularly that Pike would destroy the town in retribution. But they might also win, might expose the corruption, save their homes, build that tomorrow he'd promised. And if they did, he knew exactly what future he wanted, one with Lena Hart at the center of it, partner in all things, guardian of his heart as he would be of hers. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. Soon Morrison and the others would arrive. Plans would be finalized, weapons distributed, prayers offered to whatever power might listen to outlaws seeking justice. But for now, Eli stood in his kitchen where love had ambushed him, where a woman's gentle hands had undone more than bandages. He thought of Jake, hoping his brother would approve. He thought of his parents, who'd built this home with dreams of generations to come. And he thought of Lena, preparing for battle with the same quiet competence she brought to healing. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The cowboy, who'd never believed in love, had found his faith at last, and he'd fight to the last breath to protect it. The day stretched ahead, full of danger and possibility, but Eli Mercer faced it with something he hadn't possessed in years: hope. It burned in his chest beside the healing wounds, stronger than pain, brighter than fear. Love had found him in the unlikeliest place, at the worst possible time, but then the best things often did. They came like desert rain, unexpected, transformative, worth every risk to preserve. He checked his rifle one last time and walked out to meet his destiny, carrying the memory of Lena's kiss like armor against the coming storm. The rains came like a biblical reckoning, transforming the drought-cracked earth into a landscape of mud and fury. What began as scattered drops at sunset became a deluge by midnight, turning dry washes into raging torrents that carved new channels through the desert floor. Eli pressed himself against a boulder, watching the water rise in Arroyo Seco, somewhere in that chaos. Nora Pike was trapped, taken by Doyle's men as insurance after their failed train robbery. The plan had gone sideways when someone tipped off the gang, and in the confusion, they'd grabbed the girl. "Can't see nothing in this mess," Morrison shouted over the storm's roar, water streaming from his hat brim. Lena appeared at Eli's side, her medical bag slung across her shoulders, rifle in hand. The old mine shaft, Doyle mentioned it during the fight, said something about teaching Pike a lesson through his niece. "That's a mile upstream," Jonah protested. "In this water." "Then we'd better hurry." Eli was already moving, leading Sage along the high ground. The mare fought him, eyes rolling white with terror at the water's sound, but trust won out. They made a ragged group: Eli, Lena, Morrison, and two of his hands. The rest were dealing with Doyle's men who'd scattered across the territory. Deputy Amos had his hands full keeping Pike from organizing his own rescue party, knowing the railroad man's interference would only get Nora killed. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the transformed landscape for heartbeats at a time. The arroyo that usually held barely enough water to wet a horse's hooves now raged 30 feet wide, carrying trees and debris like toys. "There," Lena pointed during the next flash. "The mine entrance." Through the rain, they could make out figures near the old copper mine, a shaft abandoned when the vein played out 20 years back. 3 men stood guard, while others had presumably taken Nora inside. "We need a distraction," Morrison said. Eli studied the terrain with a tactician's eye. The rising water had cut off the direct approach, but there was a ledge above the mine, accessible if they circled back through the rocks. "Morrison, take your men and make noise from the east. Draw them out." He turned to Lena. "You and I go high. Come down from above." "I'm not staying behind," she said before he could suggest it. "Wouldn't dream of asking." He managed a tight smile. "Just try to keep up." The climb was treacherous, made worse by rain-slick rocks and the constant threat of flash flooding. More than once, Eli caught Lena as loose stones gave way beneath her feet. Her dress, practical as it was, hindered movement on the steep sections. "Should have worn trousers," she muttered, hiking her skirts higher. "Scandalous talk, Miss Hart." "I'll show you scandalous when this is over, Mr. Mercer." Despite everything, he found himself grinning, even facing death. She could make him forget the danger for heartbeats at a time. Morrison's distraction worked perfectly. Gunfire erupted from the east, drawing 2 of the guards away from the mine entrance. The third man hesitated, torn between duty and the fight. That hesitation cost him. Eli dropped from the ledge, taking the guard down hard. They rolled in the mud, grappling for the man's gun. A rock connected with the outlaw's temple, Lena's throwing arm proving accurate once again. "Inside," Eli gasped, struggling to his feet. The mine shaft angled down sharply, water already pooling at the entrance. They could hear voices echoing from deeper in, Doyle's distinctive growl mixing with Nora's frightened cries. "Let me go," The girl's voice cracked with tears. "My uncle will pay." "Your uncle will learn what happens when he pushes too hard." Doyle snarled. "Railroad thinks it owns everything. Everyone. Time someone pushed back." Eli and Lena exchanged glances. Whatever else Doyle was, murderer. Thief. Worse, his grievance against the railroad wasn't entirely false. It made him more dangerous. A man who believed his cause justified any cruelty. They crept deeper, the shaft splitting into two passages. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, and the sound of rushing flood echoed eerily through the stone. "The water's rising," Lena whispered urgently. "This whole mine could flood." A scream echoed from the left passage, Nora's voice, terrified and pain-filled. Eli moved without thinking, charging toward the sound. He burst into a wider chamber to find Doyle holding Nora near a vertical shaft, one of the old ore chutes that dropped into deeper levels. Well, the hero rancher. Doyle's scarred face split in an ugly grin. "Come to save another damsel worked so well with your brother." Rage flashed through Eli, hot and blinding, but Lena's hand on his arm steadied him, reminded him what mattered. Nora was alive, terror-stricken but unharmed. They still had a chance. "Let the girl go. Doyle, your issue's with Pike, not her." "Pike hides behind laws and papers. Can't touch him proper." Doyle shook Nora like a doll. "But this he'll feel." The sound of water grew louder, not dripping now, but flowing. The rain had found a way into the mine's upper reaches, following old channels toward the depths. "You hear that?" Lena stepped forward, voice calm and reasonable. "The mine's flooding. We all need to leave. Now." "Nice try, Lady Duck, but I've got—" His words cut off as the ground shuddered. Somewhere above, a larger breach had occurred. Water began pouring from cracks in the ceiling, not drops, but streams. "Move!" Eli shouted. Chaos erupted. Doyle, startled by the sudden flood, loosened his grip on Nora. The girl, showing surprising presence of mind, bit his hand hard and twisted free. She ran toward Eli and Lena, slipping on the wet stone. Doyle raised his gun, aiming at the fleeing girl. Eli moved faster than thought, putting himself between weapon and target. The shot cracked loud in the enclosed space, and fire bloomed along Eli's shoulder as the bullet scored flesh. But he kept moving, slamming into Doyle with desperate strength. They crashed against the wall, wrestling for the gun as water rose around their ankles. "Get Nora out!" Eli shouted to Lena. She hesitated for a heartbeat, torn between helping him and saving the girl. Then training took over save who you can, when you can. She grabbed Nora's hand, pulling her toward the entrance. "No, we can't leave him." "We're not," Lena said grimly. She found a timber support beam, old but solid. "Help me with this." Together they leveraged the beam free and swung it like a battering ram, catching Doyle across the back. He stumbled, giving Eli the opening he needed. A solid right cross sent the outlaw reeling toward the ore chute. For a moment, Doyle teetered on the edge, arms windmilling for balance. His eyes met Eli's fury, fear, and something like resignation flashing through them. Then he fell, screaming curses that echoed up from the depths before cutting off abruptly. "The water!" Nora shrieked. It was pouring in earnest now, already knee-deep and rising fast. The three of them fought toward the entrance, supporting each other as the current tried to sweep their feet away. Eli's shoulder burned, blood mixing with rainwater, but he kept moving. They burst from the mine as the lower passages flooded completely. Morrison and his men were waiting. Having dealt with the remaining guards, hands reached out, pulling them to safety as the mine entrance became a waterfall. "Sweet Jesus," Morrison breathed. That was too close. Lena was already examining Eli's shoulder, her face pale but hands steady. "Through and through. You're lucky." I know. Another inch." He caught her hand. "Nora." The girl huddled against Morrison's side, soaked and shaking but whole. "I'm okay. I'm okay." Then, stronger. "Uncle Abner had no part in this. Whatever else he's done, he didn't send Doyle after me." It was a crucial distinction. Pike might be corrupt, might use quasi-legal means to steal land, but kidnapping his own niece crossed a line even he wouldn't approach. Doyle went rogue. Lena said quietly, "Let his hatred override his sense." "And it killed him," Morrison added. "Question is, what happens to his gang now?" They made their way back toward town. The storm beginning to ease as dawn approached. The floodwaters still raged, but the rain had gentled to a steady patter. Eli rode with Lena, her arms around his waist to keep him steady as blood loss made him dizzy. "You saved her," she murmured against his back. "We saved her." "No." Her arms tightened. "You put yourself between her and that bullet without thinking, just like you'd do for anyone who needed protecting." "Not anyone," he admitted. "People who matter, my people." He covered her hands with his good one. "You're my people now. Lena Hart. You and this whole stubborn town." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I've been thinking about what Doyle said, about pushing back. He was wrong in his methods, evil in his actions. But the anger, that was real." "Real doesn't make it right." "No, but it makes it understandable. How many Doyles will the railroad create? How many men pushed until they break bad?" Eli considered this as they rode through the breaking dawn. "That's why we need law that works. Real justice, not Pike's version. Maybe this will be the start." In town, they found organized chaos. The flood had damaged several buildings, but miraculously taken no lives. People worked together, sandbagging, rescuing belongings, sharing what they had with those who'd lost more. Deputy Amos met them at the jail, relief plain on his face. "The girl's safe." "Safe," Eli confirmed as willing hands helped him from the saddle. "Doyle's dead, drowned in the mine." "And his gang?" "Scattered, some caught, some run." Morrison spat into the mud. "Without Doyle, they're just small-time thieves again." Amos nodded slowly. "I'll wire the territorial marshal. With Doyle gone and testimony about the kidnapping, maybe we can finally get some real law out here." As Lena stitched Eli's shoulder properly in Marisol's kitchen, the cantina had become an impromptu hospital. Pike appeared in the doorway. The railroad man looked haggard, aged a decade in one night. Is Nora?" "She's fine," Marisol said coolly. "No thanks to your dealings." Pike's face crumbled. "I never meant Doyle was supposed to be controlled. Just pressure, just business." "Men aren't tools," Eli said through gritted teeth as Lena worked. "Push them too hard. They break, or they break you." "I'll withdraw the expansion proposal." Pike said quietly, "Recommend the railroad find another route, one that doesn't require taking people's homes." It was victory, but it tasted like ash. Too many people hurt, too much damage done. "That's a start," Eli said finally. "But if you want to make real amends, use your influence. Get us a federal judge, someone who can't be bought. Help us build law that serves everyone, not just the powerful." Pike nodded, looking older and smaller than the titan who'd threatened them all. "I'll try. It's what Nora wants. What's right." He paused at the door. "I'm sorry about your brother, Mercer, about all of it." "After he left, Lena tied off the last stitch. Think he means it." "Maybe. Near-death experiences change people." Eli caught her hand before she could move away. "Speaking of which, we survived. The train job failed, but we're alive. Doyle's gone, and Pike's backing down." "A qualified victory," she agreed. "Good enough for me." He pulled her closer with his good arm. "Now, about that scandalous behavior you promised." She laughed, the sound bright as sunshine after storms. "Eli Mercer, you're wounded and exhausted. And alive, gloriously, impossibly alive." He grew serious. I meant what I said out there. You're my people now, my person, if you'll have me. A stubborn cowboy with a hero complex and a tendency to collect bullet wounds. She pretended to consider. I suppose someone needs to keep you patched up. Is that a yes? That's a yes to whatever future we can build here, together. She kissed him softly, careful of his injuries. Though I insist on a proper courtship, I have a reputation to maintain. Wouldn't dream of anything less, he assured her, then grinned. Though after everyone saw you riding with me in wet clothes, that reputation might need some work. She swatted his good shoulder, laughing again. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the rain-washed world in shades of gold and promise. The storm had passed, leaving destruction but also renewal in its wake. San Judas would rebuild, as it always had, but this time it would rebuild with hope for justice, for fairness, for a future where might didn't make right. It was a fragile hope, easily crushed, but worth nurturing. And in Marisol's kitchen, two people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos began planning their own rebuilding, a life together forged in adversity, tempered by loss but stronger for the testing. Or the floodwaters receded, but the changes they'd carved remained new channels, new possibilities, new paths forward. Some transformations, once begun, could never be undone. And sometimes, Eli reflected as Lena worked beside him, tending the wounded, that was exactly what the world needed. A cleansing flood to wash away the old and make room for something better. The warehouse stood like a cathedral of justice, its rough walls transformed by necessity into a courtroom. Morning light slanted through high windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like spirits above the packed crowd. Every soul in San Judas had gathered ranchers still bearing mud from yesterday's flood, townswomen in their best dresses, railroad workers uncertain which side they stood on. Judge Samuel Cartwright had arrived on the morning train, sent by federal authority after Pike's urgent telegrams. He was a small man with sharp eyes that missed nothing, known for incorruptibility in a territory where justice often sold to the highest bidder. This court is now in session, Cartwright announced, his gavel cracking like a gunshot. We are here to examine charges of conspiracy, theft, and corruption involving the Southwestern and Pacific Railway Company and various criminal elements. Eli sat in the witness section, his shoulder still stiff from the bullet wound, beside him. Lena held the leather portfolio containing their painstakingly gathered evidence. Across the aisle, Abner Pike sat rigid as stone, his transformation from predator to penitent complete. The prosecution may present its evidence, Judge Cartwright directed. Lena rose, moving to the makeshift evidence table with quiet authority. She'd traded her practical dress for a severe black suit that emphasized her professional bearing, but Eli could see the slight tremor in her hands as she opened the portfolio. Your Honor, we will demonstrate a pattern of criminal conspiracy between railroad officials and the Doyle gang, resulting in theft, intimidation, and murder. Her voice grew stronger with each word. The evidence includes telegraph transcripts, financial records, and eyewitness testimony. She began with the telegrams Nora had decoded, each one a thread in the web of corruption. The courtroom listened in rapt silence as she revealed how railroad funds had been diverted to pay Doyle's gang, how train schedules had been leaked to facilitate robberies, how legitimate land disputes had been resolved through arson and violence. Objection. Pike's lawyer, imported from Kansas City, stood smoothly. These documents could have been forged. Miss Hart has clear bias against my client. Your Honor, Lena responded calmly. The telegraph operator who can verify these messages is present, Miss Nora Pike, the defendant's own niece. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Nora took the stand. The girl looked pale but determined, her youth making her testimony more powerful. Miss Pike, Judge Cartwright said gently, do you understand the oath you've taken? Yes, sir. To tell the truth, all of it. no matter who it hurts. She glanced at her uncle, tears threatening. Even family. Nora's testimony was devastating in its precision. She identified each telegram, explained the codes, revealed how she'd first discovered the conspiracy. When she described her kidnapping by Doyle, several women in the audience wept openly. He said Uncle Abner needed to learn a lesson, Nora said quietly. That the railroad had pushed too hard, taken too much. He was going to hurt me to send a message. And who prevented this? The judge asked. Nora pointed to Eli and Lena. They came in the flood, risked everything to save me. The defense lawyer tried to shake her testimony, suggesting she'd been coerced, confused, traumatized. But Nora held firm, her quiet dignity unassailable. Next came Morrison, Bennett, and others who'd suffered under the railroad's pressure. Each told their story: burned barns, poisoned wells, threatened families. The pattern became undeniable, a systematic campaign of terror designed to force land sales. But it was the financial evidence that truly damned Pike. Lena presented ledgers showing payments to security consultants that matched exactly with dates of Doyle's raids, money meant for railroad construction diverted to private accounts, then withdrawn as cash payments to outlaws. Your Honor, Lena said, placing the final document before the judge. This is a signed authorization from Mr. Pike directing funds to be paid to S. Doyle for special services. The amount matches precisely what was stolen from the Army payroll train last month. Pike's lawyer objected, argued, attempted every legal maneuver, but the evidence was overwhelming, each piece supporting the next like stones in an arch. Finally, Judge Cartwright called Pike himself to testify. The railroad man rose slowly, as if carrying invisible chains. Mr. Pike, the judge began. You've heard the evidence against you. What do you say? Pike was silent for a long moment, then spoke in a voice stripped of its former arrogance. I came here to build something, to bring progress, prosperity. The railroad was meant to connect communities, create opportunities. He paused, struggling. But somewhere I lost my way, started seeing people as obstacles instead of as people. Are you confessing to the charges? I never directly ordered violence, Pike said carefully. But I created the conditions for it, paid men I knew were capable of terrible things. Looked away when those things happened. His voice broke. I'm responsible. Not just legally, but morally, for all of it. The courtroom erupted. Some called for immediate hanging, others for clemency. Judge Cartwright's gavel restored order. Mr. Pike, this court recognizes your confession. However, there remains the matter of your subordinates and co-conspirators. What followed was extraordinary. Pike, perhaps seeking redemption or merely revenge on those who'd betrayed him, began naming names, railroad executives who'd approved the scheme, government officials who'd been bribed, a web of corruption stretching from San Judas to Washington. Eli watched Lena as she listened, saw the satisfaction and sadness warring in her expression. This was what she'd worked toward for 3 years, but victory brought no resurrection of the dead. During a recess, they stepped outside for air. The town looked different in daylight, cleaner after the flood, but bearing scars that would take time to heal. You did it, Eli said quietly. We did it, she corrected. All of us, the whole town standing together. What happens now when the trial's over? She turned to him, and he saw uncertainty in her eyes for the first time. I don't know. For 3 years. This has been my purpose, finding justice for Michael. For all the victims. Now, she gestured helplessly. Now you heal people instead of hunting their killers, Eli suggested. Stay in San Judas. Build that clinic we talked about. Make a life that's about more than revenge. With you. If you'll have me. Though I should warn you, ranching's not exciting. Lot of early mornings. Ornery horses. Weather that never cooperates. She smiled, the expression transforming her face. Sounds perfect, quiet, peaceful, everything I never knew I wanted. They were interrupted by commotion from the courthouse. Deputy Amos emerged, his face grim. Judge wants everyone back. Pike's lawyer has something to say. Inside, the defense attorney stood with a telegram in his hand. Your Honor, I've received word that changes everything. The territorial governor has issued pardons for Mr. Pike and his associates in exchange for their cooperation in exposing corruption at the highest levels. The crowd exploded in fury. Pardons, Morrison roared. After what they've done! Judge Cartwright's gavel cracked repeatedly. When silence finally fell, he spoke with careful precision. Mr. Harding, are you telling this court that political interference supersedes justice? I'm saying the governor has authority. The governor has authority in territorial matters. This is a federal court examining federal crimes. The judge's eyes were steel. I do not recognize these pardons. Pike stood suddenly. Your Honor, I don't want the pardon. I want to face justice, to make whatever amends I can. His lawyer looked stunned. Abner, think about what you're saying. I have thought, for the first time in years. I've thought clearly. Pike faced the judge. I plead guilty to all charges. I'll cooperate fully with federal investigators. And I'll use whatever influence remains to me to ensure the railroad compensates everyone harmed by my actions. The courtroom sat in shocked silence. Then, slowly, Marisol began to clap. Others joined, not in celebration but in acknowledgement of a man choosing accountability over escape. Judge Cartwright nodded slowly. Mr. Pike, this court accepts your plea. Sentencing will be tomorrow, after I've reviewed all evidence. He turned to the crowd. This court also orders the immediate cessation of all railroad expansion activities pending federal review. Any lands taken through intimidation or coercion are to be returned to their rightful owners. The gavel fell with finality. As people filed out, discussing the dramatic turn, Eli noticed Nora standing alone, tears streaming down her face. Lena went to her immediately. I'm proud of you, Lena said softly. What you did took incredible courage. I betrayed my own uncle, Nora whispered. No, Eli said firmly. You chose justice over blood. That's not betrayal, that's integrity. What will I do now? Where will I go? Marisol appeared, placing a motherly arm around the girl. You'll stay with me. Mia, learn to run a proper business. That telegraph training will be useful. Honest communication is good for commerce. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of victory and loss, the town gathered at the cantina. It wasn't quite a celebration, too much pain remained for that, but there was a sense of corner turned, a future possible. Morrison raised his glass. To justice delayed but not denied. To neighbors who stood together. To the future of San Judas. To the future. The crowd echoed. Eli found Lena on the cantina's back porch, watching stars emerge in the clear sky. Regrets? He asked. No, well, one. She turned to him. I wish Michael could have seen this, could know that his death meant something. He knows, Eli said with certainty. Same as Jake knows. They're part of this victory, part of every life saved because the truth came out. She leaned against him, careful of his healing shoulder. When did you become philosophical? When a certain nurse taught me that healing takes more than bandages. Sometimes it takes justice. Sometimes it takes time. Always it takes hope. Speaking of healing, she pulled a letter from her pocket. The town council approached me. They want to fund a proper clinic, a real one, with equipment and supplies and everything needed to serve the territory. That's wonderful. You'll accept if my business partner agrees. She smiled at his confusion. I can't run a clinic and help manage a ranch. I'll need someone good with numbers, someone the town trusts, someone who believes in building rather than tearing down. Equal partners. In all things, she confirmed. He kissed her then, there under the emerging stars, sealing a partnership that would last decades. Around them, San Judas began the slow work of rebuilding not just structures, but trust, community, hope for better tomorrows. The trial would continue tomorrow. Pike would be sentenced. His testimony would ripple outward, exposing corruption throughout the territory. And slowly, the wheels of justice would grind toward righteousness. But tonight was for quieter victories, for a town that had stood against power and won, for a woman who'd found justice and love in equal measure, for a man who'd learned that some things were worth any risk to protect. Inside the cantina, someone started a fiddle tune. Music spilled into the night, mixing with laughter and conversation, the sound of a community knitting itself back together, stronger for the breaking. "Dance with me," Lena said suddenly. "Here, now. Here, now, while we can." So they danced on the back porch of a frontier cantina, wounded and weary, but triumphant. Around them, San Judas settled into a new rhythm, one of hope rather than fear, of law rather than force. It wasn't a perfect ending. Perfect didn't exist in the territory, where life was hard and death came easy. But it was just, and sometimes justice was the best anyone could hope for. The stars wheeled overhead, silent witnesses to small human victories against enormous odds. And in their light, two people who'd found each other in the darkness began building a future worth having. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, justice had won, love had triumphed, and for once in the blood-soaked history of the frontier, the good guys had prevailed. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The dawn broke gentle over San Judas, painting the railroad tracks in shades of copper and gold. A year had passed since the trial that changed everything, and the town bore little resemblance to the fear-gripped settlement it had once been, where Pike's grand railroad depot should have stood. There was instead a modest station serving the rerouted line, one that curved respectfully around the town rather than through it. Eli stood on the rise overlooking his expanded ranch, watching the morning crew move cattle to fresh pasture. The drought was a memory now, replaced by a season of plenty that had turned the desert green. Beside him, Sage cropped grass contentedly, her coat gleaming with health. "You're up early," Lena's voice came from behind him. He turned to find his wife of 6 months carrying 2 cups of coffee, her medical bag slung over one shoulder. Even after their wedding, she maintained her professional routine clinic hours in town 3 days a week, house calls throughout the territory. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Today's the day." She nodded, understanding immediately. Today, Silas Doyle's remaining gang members would hang in the territorial capital the final chapter of a bloody saga. Justice delayed but ultimately delivered. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing his question from the night of the trial. "No, they made their choices." He pulled her close with his free arm. "But I'm glad it's ending away from here. San Judas has seen enough death." They stood together watching the sunrise until the sound of approaching horses interrupted their solitude. Frank Morrison appeared, leading a small convoy of wagons loaded with lumber and supplies. "Morning, Mercers," he called cheerfully. "Ready for another day of building." Today was special beyond the executions. Today they broke ground on the new schoolhouse, funded jointly by the town council and surprising restitution payments from the railroad company. Pike, serving his 10-year sentence, had been true to his word, using his remaining influence to ensure compensation reached those he'd wronged. The building site buzzed with activity by the time Eli and Lena arrived. Half the town had turned out, hammers and saws in hand. Children ran between the workers' legs, excited by the promise of formal education coming to San Judas. "Miss Nora," young Tommy Martinez called out, "will you really be our teacher?" Nora Pike, transformed from frightened telegraph operator to confident young woman, smiled warmly. "Assistant teacher, Tommy, Mrs. Chen has graciously agreed to lead the school. I'll help with arithmetic and writing." The widow Chen, whose small ranch had survived the railroad's assault, had revealed during the trial that she'd once taught school in San Francisco before circumstances drove her to the territory. Her appointment as head teacher had been unanimous. Eli Deputy Amos Reed approached, still wearing his badge, but with an easier manner than in the dark days. "Thought you should know, got a telegram this morning. Federal marshals arrested 3 more railroad executives back east. Your wife's testimony reached all the way to Washington." Lena looked pleased, but not surprised. She'd spent weeks corresponding with federal investigators, ensuring the corruption's roots were fully exposed. "Justice has long arms when properly directed," she said simply. The morning progressed with the satisfying sounds of construction. Eli worked alongside Morrison and the others, raising walls that would shelter future generations. During a water break, he noticed Marisol teaching Nora the finer points of timber selection, the 2 women having formed an unlikely but powerful partnership. "Never thought I'd see the day." Old Jonah mused, appearing at Eli's elbow. "Town pulling together like this. Pike's niece working alongside folks her uncle tried to destroy. People aren't responsible for their relations' sins," Eli replied. Nora proved that when it counted. "Speaking of relations," Jonah nodded toward the road where a familiar wagon approached. "That'd be your in-laws, I reckon." Lena's face lit up as she recognized the elderly couple on the wagon seat. She'd written to them after the wedding, but this was their first visit to San Judas. Eli watched nervously as Paul and Ruth Hart climbed down, taking in the rough frontier town their daughter now called home. "Papa, Mama," Lena embraced them tearfully. "I didn't think you'd come." "Couldn't miss seeing our daughter's new life," Ruth Hart said, though her expression suggested reservations about what she saw. "This is rustic." "This is home," Lena corrected gently. "Eli, come meet my parents properly." The introduction was formal, awkward city clockmaker and frontier rancher finding little common ground. But Paul Hart's reserve melted when he saw the clinic building, its modern construction standing proud on Main Street. "You built this for her?" he asked Eli. "The town built it. I just helped. Your daughter saved more lives here in a year than most doctors manage in a decade. San Judas knows what it owes her." "And what she owes it," Lena added softly. "This place gave me purpose beyond revenge. It gave me a future." The tour of town continued, with Lena showing her parents the changes Morrison's rebuilt ranch, the cooperative grain store, the new wells that ensured water for all. Everywhere they went, people greeted Lena with genuine warmth and respect. "I'm Dr. Mercer." A young Mexican woman hurried up, baby in arms. "Look how big little Miguel has grown thanks to your medicine. He thrives." As Lena examined the healthy infant, her mother watched with growing understanding. "She's happy here," Ruth murmured to Eli. "Truly happy. I wasn't sure. When her letters spoke of gunfights and trials—" "Ma'am, I'd die before letting harm come to her," Eli said simply. "I believe you already nearly have. Several times." According to her letters. Ruth studied him carefully. "She says you're teaching her to shoot. Everyone in the territory needs that skill. But Lena's teaching me more how to heal instead of just protect, build instead of just defend." He paused, then added, "She's made me whole, Mrs. Hart. I hope I do the same for her." The older woman's face softened. "I believe you do, Mr. Mercer. I believe you do." The schoolhouse walls were up by noon, and the town gathered for a celebration lunch. Tables groaned under the weight of shared dishes, Marisol's spiced beans, Mrs. Chen's dumplings, Morrison's beef, countless other contributions representing the town's diverse population. Judge Cartwright, who'd returned for the groundbreaking, raised his glass. "To San Judas, proof that justice and community can triumph over greed and violence, may this schoolhouse stand as testament to your courage." "To the future," the crowd responded. After lunch, while others returned to construction. Eli found himself walking with Lena toward the small cemetery. Her parents followed at a respectful distance, understanding this pilgrimage's importance. They stood before two markers, Jake Mercer and Michael Hart, brothers in sacrifice, if not blood. Lena had insisted on the second marker, creating a memorial for her brother even though his body lay elsewhere. "Think they'd approve?" Lena asked quietly. "Of what we've built from their loss?" "I think they'd be proud." Eli replied, "We took their deaths and made them mean something, stopped the killing, built the future they'd have wanted." She knelt, placing wildflowers on both graves. "Rest easy," she whispered. "Your work is done. Ours continues." As they walked back toward town, Paul Hart fell into step beside Eli. "That marker for Michael, that was your doing." Seemed right. Man should be remembered where his impact was felt. Michael's death started Lena's journey, which saved this town. He belongs here as much as any of us. The clockmaker extended his hand. "You'll do, son, you'll do." Evening brought the completion of the schoolhouse frame. Standing proud against the sunset, the workers gathered, tired but satisfied, admiring their handiwork. "School supplies arrive next week," Nora announced. "Books, slates, even a globe. We'll be ready for classes by month's end. My Jenny can finally learn her letters proper," Tom Bennett said, his new ranch prospering under fair conditions. "Never thought I'd see the day." As purple shadows lengthened, families began drifting home. Eli and Lena lingered with her parents, showing them the ranch that would be their home for the visit. The house had been expanded an extra bedroom, a proper surgery where Lena could treat serious cases, a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. "It's beautiful," Ruth admitted, surprising them. "Wild and hard, but beautiful. I see why you love it." That night, as her parents settled in the guest room, Eli and Lena sat on their porch watching stars emerge. The railroad tracks gleamed faintly in the distance, no longer a threat, but simply another thread connecting San Judas to the wider world. "Any word from Pike?" Lena asked. "Amos says he's teaching literacy to other prisoners, finding redemption where he can." Eli shrugged. "Man might actually emerge better than he went in." "Stranger things have happened. Look at us, a revenge-driven nurse and a bitter rancher, turned into pillars of the community." "Pillars?" Eli laughed. "That's a bit much." "Is it? You're on the town council. I'm the only doctor for 50 miles. We helped build a school today. Face it, Mr. Mercer, we've become respectable." "Tragic," he agreed solemnly. "What would Jake and Michael say? They'd say we earned it, every bit of peace, every moment of happiness." She leaned against him. "Though I could do with less excitement in our future." As if in response to her words, a rider appeared on the road. Moving fast, they tensed, old habits dying hard, but relaxed when they recognized young Tommy Martinez. "Dr. Mercer," he called out. "Mrs. Dominguez says it's time the baby's coming." Lena was already rising, reaching for her medical bag. "So much for less excitement," she said wryly. "Want to come? You're getting good at assisting with births. Try to stop me." They rode out together into the star-filled night, partners in all things, racing toward new life in a town that had learned to choose hope over fear. Behind them, the new schoolhouse stood silent sentinel, waiting to shelter dreams not yet dreamed. The railroad tracks still cut across the landscape, but they no longer divided, they connected. The telegraph still chattered, but it carried news of births and marriages alongside business. The guns still hung on pegs, but they gathered dust while hands turned to building. San Judas had survived its trial by fire and emerged transformed. Not perfect perfection didn't exist in the territory, but whole. A community that had faced down power and won the right to determine its own future. And at the heart of it, 2 people who'd found love in the midst of loss, who'd chosen healing over vengeance, who'd built something worth protecting from the ashes of what was taken. The baby's cry split the night air healthy, strong, announcing its arrival to the world. Lena emerged from the Dominguez home hours later, tired but smiling, blood on her apron but joy in her eyes. "Mother and child doing well," she announced to the anxious family. "A girl. They're naming her Esperanza. Hope." "Good name," Eli said, helping her mount for the ride home. Fitting for a child born in the new San Judas. As they rode back under stars that had witnessed so much pain and triumph. Lena reached over to take his hand. "I love you, Eli Mercer. Thank you for giving me a life worth living." "Thank you for showing me I still had life to live," he replied. Their horses walked on, steady and sure, carrying them home to a future they'd carved from the unforgiving desert. Behind them, the lights of San Judas twinkled like earthbound stars, a beacon of what was possible when ordinary people stood together against extraordinary odds. The Wild West was changing, civilization creeping in with each passing season. But some things remained constant: the need for courage, for justice, for love strong enough to build upon. These things San Judas had in abundance now, paid for in blood but maintained in peace. The schoolhouse bell would ring soon, calling children to learn. The clinic would open its doors to all who needed healing. The ranches would prosper under fair skies and fair laws. And somewhere in the great beyond, two brothers watched it all with satisfaction, their sacrifice finally bearing the fruit of lasting change. The story of San Judas was far from over, but its darkest chapter had closed, and the pages ahead waited to be filled with the everyday miracles of a community that had chosen light over darkness, love over fear, justice over power. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything they'd fought for, and more than they'd dared to hope. Thank you so much for listening to this story of love, justice, and redemption in the Old West. I hope Eli and Lena's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles, just like those old railroad tracks connected frontier towns. If you enjoyed this tale from Wild West Night, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. And if this story moved you, consider pressing the hype button to help more listeners discover our little corner of the frontier. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward that horizon.